whispers from the void. The aurora borealis twisted like verdant ribbons across the night sky, casting an eerie glow over the snow-covered pines. Nikolai Petrov adjusted his thermal imaging equipment, his breath forming clouds in the frigid Norwegian air. Tonight marked his 300th consecutive night documenting atmospheric anomalies, work that his former colleagues at the university had dismissed as obsessive and fruitless. Another degree warmer than yesterday, he muttered to himself, noting the reading in his worn leather journal. The cabin behind him stood as his only companion in this remote outpost, 60 kilometers from the nearest village. Just how he preferred it. The equipment suddenly beeped, its readings spiking wildly. Nikolai frowned, tapping the display. Malfunction, again? But the numbers continued climbing, and then, impossibility. The aurora above him pulsed, contracted, and opened like a wound in the sky. A sound like crystal breaking echoed across the valley as a streak of violet light tore through the aurora, plummeting toward the forest below. The impact shook the ground beneath Nikolai's feet, nearly toppling his equipment. Scientific curiosity overrode caution. Grabbing his pack and headlamp, Nikolai trudged through knee-deep snow toward the impact site. The rational part of his mind suggested meteorite or satellite. Debris. The part that had spent too many solitary nights beneath strange skies whispered other possibilities. The crash had carved a steaming furrow through the snow and earth, terminating in a crater where the pines had been flattened in a perfect circle. At its center lay something Nikolai had no scientific classification for, a translucent, crystalline form that pulsed with inner light. As he approached, the light responded, dimming and brightening in rhythmic patterns. It was alive. The form shifted, unfurling like liquid glass into a vaguely humanoid shape. Where a face might be, there were only facets that refracted light in hypnotic patterns. Its body appeared feminine in structure, but alien in composition, as though starlight had been frozen into physical form. Nikolai's scientific mind catalogued details even as his heart hammered with fear and wonder. The being's surface temperature read impossibly cold on his handheld thermometer, yet the snow beneath it melted. It appeared wounded, with a jagged fissure running along what might be considered its side. "Can you understand me?" he asked, his voice sounding foolish in the silence. The being tilted what seemed to be its head, and a sound like wind through crystal chimes emanated from it. The lights within its form pulsed in sequence, 1, 2, 3, then repeated. Nikolai mimicked the pattern, tapping his chest. 1, 2, 3. The being's light intensified, and it attempted to rise but collapsed, the fissure widening. Instinctively, Nikolai reached toward it, stopping just short of contact. The air between them crackled with static electricity. A sudden image flooded his mind. Stars exploding, worlds shattering, a desperate flight through emptiness. Then, overwhelming loneliness. "You're alone," Nikolai whispered, understanding without knowing how. The being extended a crystalline appendage, touching Nikolai's outstretched hand. The sensation wasn't cold as expected, but like gentle electricity coursing through his veins. In that moment, something passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared isolation. He made a decision then, guided by something beyond scientific reasoning. Removing his thermal coat, he carefully wrapped it around the being and lifted it. Surprisingly light, like holding solidified air. "I'll help you," he said simply, trudging back toward his cabin as the northern lights danced overhead, now seeming to follow their movement with curious attention. Inside his sparse living quarters, Nikolai cleared his research table, laying the being down gently. Under the cabin's lights, its composition became clearer, neither solid nor liquid, but something between, with complex geometric patterns shifting beneath its surface. The being's lights dimmed worryingly. Whatever it was weakening. Nikolai worked through the night, attempting to communicate, to understand what it needed. By dawn, he had a name for her, derived from the melodic chimes she produced that reminded him of an old lullaby his grandmother once sang. Selene. he said softly as the first light of morning touched the crystalline form. "I'll call you Selene." The lights within her pulsed once in what Nikolai chose to interpret as acceptance. Patterns and frost. The days that followed developed their own peculiar rhythm. Nikolai found himself adapting his research schedule around Selene's presence, observing her with scientific fascination that gradually evolved into something more personal. Her crystalline body had begun to heal, the jagged fissure slowly closing as she absorbed energy from light sources around the cabin. Communication remained their greatest challenge. Selene couldn't produce human speech, but she developed a system of light patterns and melodic tones that Nikolai diligently documented. He discovered she could manipulate the electromagnetic field around her, causing his instruments to display symbols and numerical sequences. "This is remarkable," Nikolai muttered one evening, watching as frost patterns formed on his window glass, creating complex mathematical equations he recognized from his atmospheric studies. "You understand my research?" Selene's body glowed brighter, in what he now recognized as affirmation. She drifted closer to his monitoring equipment, her presence causing the readings to stabilize in ways Nikolai had never achieved. The climate anomalies he'd been tracking for years suddenly displayed clear patterns when she interacted with the data. "You see connections I've been missing," he realized aloud. Outside, the aurora had grown more vibrant since Selene's arrival, often concentrating directly above the cabin. Nikolai couldn't help but wonder if her presence was affecting Earth's magnetosphere on a localized scale. On the 7th night, Selene led him outside during a particularly intense aurora display. She raised her crystalline appendages toward the sky, and the northern lights responded, bending, flowing, and forming shapes that matched the geometric patterns within her body. The temperature around them dropped dramatically, ice crystals forming in the air and catching the colored light. "You're communicating with it," Nikolai breathed, his scientific mind racing with implications. "Or through it?" Selene's form pulsed with increasing urgency. She touched his forehead, sending images into his mind. Vast networks of energy spanning galaxies, beings like herself navigating these cosmic currents, a harmonious civilization existing between dimensions rather than on planetary surfaces. And then catastrophe, a great wave of darkness, her people scattered, connection lost, endless drifting through cold emptiness. Nikolai gasped as the connection broke, understanding flooding through him. "You were trying to find others like you through the aurora. It's a natural gateway, isn't it?" Before she could respond, the distant sound of helicopter rotors broke the silence. Nikolai's head snapped up, spotting lights approaching from the south. No one ever came this far north without purpose. "We need to get you inside," he said urgently. But Selene was already moving toward the cabin, her light dimming to near invisibility. The helicopter circled once before landing in a clearing half a kilometer away. Through his binoculars, Nikolai observed figures in cold weather gear disembarking with equipment that looked distinctly like radiation detection devices. His satellite phone rang, something that had happened only twice in 3 years. "Dr. Petrov," a woman's voice came through clearly despite the distance. "This is Director Camille Rousseau with the European Science Foundation. We've detected unusual energy signatures from your location for the past week. Care to explain?" Nikolai's mouth went dry. "Atmospheric research produces anomalous readings sometimes. Nothing concerning." "Indeed." The woman's tone was polite but disbelieving. "Our satellites show patterns inconsistent with any known natural phenomenon. We'll be paying you a visit tomorrow to discuss further." The call ended before he could protest. Inside the cabin, he found Selene huddled in the darkest corner, her light barely visible. "They're looking for you," he said unnecessarily. Selene produced a series of chimes that somehow conveyed anxiety. She moved to Nikolai's computer and, with a touch, caused it to display a simulation of Earth's atmosphere with troubling patterns forming. "What am I seeing?" he asked, leaning closer. Through more images shared directly to his mind, Nikolai understood. Her arrival had created a disturbance in Earth's protective magnetosphere. The longer she stayed, the more noticeable it would become. Governments, would eventually track the source. "We need to find a way to mask your energy signature," Nikolai said, running calculations. "And I need to convince these researchers that my work explains the anomalies." That night, as Celine rested in a makeshift chamber Nikolai constructed from materials that seemed to contain her energy output, he worked feverishly to adapt his legitimate research into a cover story. But his mind kept returning to the images she had shared, a civilization of beings existing in harmony with cosmic energies, now lost and scattered across dimensions. For the first time in years, Nikolai's isolation felt like a choice rather than a condition. Celine's loneliness spanned centuries and cosmic distances that made his self-imposed exile seem trivial. "I won't let them take you," he promised the sleeping crystalline form, surprising himself with the protective fervor in his voice. Science had always been his only commitment, until now. Outside, the aurora pulsed in response as though the sky itself had heard his vow. Aurora's shadow. The European Science Foundation team arrived precisely at noon, their vehicles carving dark tracks through the pristine snow. Nikolai had worked through the night preparing his cabin and his story, concealing Selena in a modified Faraday cage beneath his research station's floorboards. The electromagnetic shielding, combined with a series of dampening devices he'd hastily constructed, should mask her energy signature, at least temporarily. Director Camille Rousseau cut an imposing figure despite her small stature. Her silver-streaked, black hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her piercing gray eyes missed nothing as she surveyed Nikolai's cabin. "Impressive isolation, Dr. Petrov," she remarked, removing her gloves. "Most researchers would go mad without human contact for so long." Nikolai shrugged. "The Aurora makes better company than most humans." Her team, 3 technicians and what appeared to be a security officer, began setting up monitoring equipment around the cabin perimeter. Camille examined Nikolai's research station with clinical interest. "You've recorded some fascinating data patterns," she said, scrolling through his carefully edited files. "These energy fluctuations coincide precisely with our satellite observations. My theory involves a new form of electromagnetic resonance between the upper atmosphere and terrestrial magnetic fields," Nikolai explained, pointing to charts he'd prepared. "The phenomenon creates self-sustaining energy loops that manifest visually as unusual aurora patterns." Camille smiled thinly. "A convenient explanation." One of her technicians called her over to a monitor displaying readings from outside. They spoke in hushed tones, glancing occasionally at Nikolai. The security officer positioned himself casually near the door. "Dr. Petrov," Camille said finally, "we've detected trace elements in the soil half a kilometer east that match nothing in our periodic table. Would you care to explain that?" Nikolai maintained his composure despite his racing heart. "Meteorite fragments, most likely. I documented an impact last week but haven't had time to collect samples." "How fortunate that it landed so near your research station." "Fortunate for science," Nikolai countered. The tense conversation was interrupted by a sudden power fluctuation. The lights dimmed momentarily, and Nikolai's instruments went haywire before stabilizing. Beneath the floorboards, Selene was reacting to something. Camille's eyes narrowed. "Your generator seems unstable. Arctic conditions are hard on equipment." As night fell, the aurora appeared with unprecedented brilliance, drawing everyone outside. Waves of green and violet light danced overhead, forming patterns more complex than any Nikolai had seen before Selena's arrival. "Magnificent," breathed one of the technicians. "And entirely artificial," Camille stated coldly. "This is no natural phenomenon, Dr. Petrov." Before Nikolai could respond, a sharp crack sounded from within the cabin. The floorboards had splintered, and Selene emerged, her crystalline form pulsing with intense light. The Faraday cage had failed, or she had deliberately broken through it. The ESF team reacted with startled shouts and drawn weapons. Nikolai moved protectively towards Selene, hands raised. "Don't, she's not dangerous." Selene drifted toward Camille, ignoring the others. Her form shifted, creating a display of light that projected images into the air between them, her home dimension collapsing, her people scattered across the cosmos. her centuries-long journey through the void. Camille staggered, backward, overwhelmed by the display. What? What is this? She's trying to explain, Nikolai said urgently. She's a refugee, the last of her kind. Her dimension was destroyed by some kind of cosmic catastrophe. The security officer leveled his weapon. Director, we should contain this entity immediately. Wait, Camille commanded, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. This is unprecedented contact. Celine's projection changed, showing Earth's atmosphere with disturbing patterns forming. The same simulation she had shown Nikolai. But now there was more. Cascading effects leading to climate destabilization, then global weather catastrophes. Her presence is affecting our magnetosphere, Nikolai explained, understanding the new information. She doesn't mean to, but her energy signature is incompatible with Earth's protective field. The longer she stays, the worse it gets. Camille's expression hardened. Then she must be removed or contained. That would kill her, Nikolai protested. One life versus potentially billions? Camille countered. The calculation is simple. Selene moved to Nikolai's side, her crystalline form resonating with a mournful tone. She projected one final image, herself dissolving into energy, returning to the void, Earth's atmosphere stabilizing in her absence. No, Nikolai whispered, the implication clear. There must be another way. Celine touched his face gently, sending him not images this time but emotions, gratitude for his kindness, joy at finding connection after endless solitude, and a deep sadness tinged with acceptance. She's offering to leave, Nikolai translated hollowly, to protect Earth. Camille studied them both, her scientific detachment wavering at the evident bond between human and alien. We need time to study this situation properly. There may be alternatives. How long? Nikolai demanded. 48 hours, she decided. My team will establish a research perimeter. No one enters or leaves without authorization. As the ESF team set up a makeshift research station around the cabin, Nikolai led Celine back inside. Her light had dimmed considerably, the effort of the communication draining her. I won't let you sacrifice yourself, he told her fiercely. We'll find another solution. Celine's response was a pattern of light that somehow conveyed both doubt and hope. Above them, the aurora twisted into shapes never before seen in Earth's skies, as though the heavens themselves were searching for answers neither science nor cosmic wisdom had yet discovered. Borrowed light dawn broke with scientific precision, indifferent to the extraordinary circumstances unfolding beneath its pale Arctic light. The ESF team had transformed the area around Nikolai's cabin into a makeshift research facility with monitoring equipment forming a perimeter that functioned as both laboratory and containment. Inside, Nikolai hunched over calculations, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. Celine hovered nearby, her crystalline form noticeably dimmer than the day before. The fissure in her side, which had been healing, had begun to widen again. Your physical integrity is deteriorating, he murmured, running a scanner over her form. The effort to shield your energy signature is draining you. Celine's response was a weak pulse of light and a series of chimes that somehow conveyed resignation. She drifted to the window, looking out at the scientists collecting samples from the crash site. Director Rousseau entered without knocking, her tablet displaying a complex array of readings. Your friend is having an exponentially increasing effect on our atmosphere, she announced without preamble. The disruption has accelerated beyond our initial models. She's trying to contain her energy signature, Nikolai protested. It's harming her. Noble but insufficient. Camille's voice softened slightly. Dr. Petrov, I understand your attachment, but you must see the larger picture. The destabilization will reach critical threshold in approximately 36 hours, not 48 as we estimated. Nikolai ran his hands through his disheveled hair. What are you proposing? Containment using a quantum isolation field. We've called in specialists from Geneva. She hesitated. It would essentially place her in stasis, indefinitely. Prison, Nikolai translated bitterly. Preservation, Camille countered. For her and for Earth. After Camille left, Nikolai paced the cabin in agitation. There must be another solution. Celine approached his atmospheric monitoring equipment, her light briefly intensifying as she interfaced with it. Data streamed across the screen, calculations beyond Nikolai's understanding, yet somehow familiar. You're showing me something about the aurora, he realized, studying the patterns. The electromagnetic gateway you tried to use. Through a series of light pulses and direct mental images, Celine communicated her idea. The aurora wasn't just a visual phenomenon, but a manifestation of Earth's connection to cosmic energy currents, similar to the pathways her people had once navigated. With the right modifications, it could potentially serve as a conduit to transport her energy safely away from Earth. But where would you go? Nikolai asked, his voice catching. You said your dimension was destroyed. Celine's response came as a gentle touch to his temple, flooding his mind with images of the void between stars. Not empty as humans perceived it, but filled with currents of energy, echoes of distant dimensions. She would drift again, searching for others of her kind or perhaps a compatible realm. The unspoken truth hung between them. It would likely mean endless solitude again. I won't let you return to that isolation, Nikolai said firmly. He turned back to his equipment, eyes suddenly wide with realization. Wait, what if the energy transfer could be reciprocal? A controlled exchange rather than just expulsion? Through the night, they worked together. Nikolai translating Celine's theoretical knowledge into practical applications using Earth technology. By morning, they had constructed a crude prototype from modified research equipment, a device that could potentially channel Celine's excess energy into the aurora while drawing stabilizing terrestrial energy back to her. When Camille arrived, with her quantum containment specialist, Nikolai presented their alternative. It's untested and theoretical, Camille objected after reviewing their work. So is your containment field, Nikolai countered. But our solution doesn't require imprisonment. And if it fails? Then you proceed with your containment plan. We're asking for one attempt. Camille studied them both, the determined human scientist and the weakening crystalline being who had traveled across dimensions. The risk assessment cannot possibly account for the moral implications of imprisoning a sentient being indefinitely, Nikolai interrupted, especially the last of her kind. Something in Camille's expression shifted. You have until sunset. I'm evacuating non-essential personnel as a precaution. As the Arctic sun began its descent, Nikolai and Celine made final adjustments to their device beneath the watchful eyes of Camille and her remaining team. The aurora was already visible, unusually bright for this early hour. The atmospheric disruption is accelerating, a technician reported nervously. Celine's form had grown alarmingly transparent, the effort of maintaining her integrity clearly taking its toll. She placed her crystalline appendages on the device, causing it to hum with energy. Ready? Nikolai asked, his hand hovering over the activation switch. Celine's response was to touch his face one last time, sending not information but emotion, a complex mixture of gratitude, hope, and something Nikolai could only interpret as affection. The sensation lingered like the memory of warmth long after she withdrew. He swallowed hard. Initiating energy transfer in 3, 2, 1. The device activated with a surge of power that momentarily darkened all equipment within a 100-meter radius. Above them, the aurora responded immediately, its colors intensifying to near-blinding brilliance. Celine's form began to pulse in rhythm with the lights overhead, energy visibly flowing between her, the device, and the sky. It's working, Nikolai breathed, checking the readings. The atmospheric disruption is stabilizing. But something unexpected was happening. As Selene drew in terrestrial energy, her crystalline structure began to change, becoming more opaque, more substantial. Simultaneously, Nikolai felt a strange lightness spreading through his body, starting from his hands where they touched the control panel. Nikolai, Camille called out in alarm. Your biosignature is changing. He looked down to see his hands becoming slightly translucent, veins glowing with faint light. Understanding dawned with both wonder and fear. It's not just an energy exchange, he realized. It's more fundamental than that. Celine's chimes had taken on an urgent tone. The images she projected into his mind showed what was happening. Her essence was becoming partially terrestrial, while his was acquiring elements of her crystalline nature. The device was creating a hybrid state for both of them, neither fully human nor fully of her kind. "Stop the process," Camille commanded. "We can't," Nikolai replied, his voice strangely resonant, not without risking catastrophic release of the contained energy. As sunset painted the sky in hues that mirrored the aurora above, Nikolai and Selene stood locked in the transformation, their forms gradually shifting towards some middle state neither had anticipated. And yet, somehow, Nikolai wasn't afraid. For the first time since Selene had crashed into his world, he truly understood what it meant to exist as she did, perceiving reality through the language of energy and light. And in that understanding, a possibility emerged that neither science nor cosmic wisdom had foreseen. Resonance across stars. The transformation completed as the last light of day surrendered to the Arctic night. Where Nikolai and Selene had stood as separate entities, a new presence emerged, neither fully human nor entirely crystalline, but a harmonious integration of both. Nikolai's consciousness expanded beyond physical limitations, while Selene's essence anchored in terrestrial reality for the first time in centuries. Camille and her team watched in stunned silence as the hybrid being before them emanated gentle waves of light that stabilized the surrounding atmosphere instantly. "The disruption is gone," a technician reported in disbelief, checking monitors. "Completely neutralized." "What have you become?" Camille whispered. The answer came not in words but in a shared vision projected to all present. A new form of existence that could traverse both physical and energy realms, belonging to both Earth and the cosmos. The resonance patterns that had threatened Earth's magnetosphere now flowed in perfect harmony with it. "We are balance," came the response, Nikolai's voice layered with crystalline tones. "The bridge between worlds." In the days that followed, Camille's scientific pragmatism gave way to wonder as she documented the unprecedented symbiosis. The hybrid being demonstrated how Selene's people had once served as cosmic caretakers, maintaining equilibrium between dimensions. This knowledge, combined with human ingenuity, offered solutions to climate instabilities Nikolai had spent years studying. Most remarkably, the hybrid detected faint energy signatures from distant reaches of space, echoes of others like Selene who had survived their dimension's collapse. 1 month after the transformation, Camille arrived at the cabin to find it empty. Above, the aurora formed a perfect spiral, a farewell message and a promise. The hybrid being had departed to seek others, using their unique dual nature to heal rifts between dimensions and perhaps someday gather the scattered remnants of Selene's civilization. Instruments around the world would occasionally detect their signature among the stars, a resonance pattern that bridged loneliness with connection, loss with renewal, human limitation with cosmic possibility. Scientists called it an atmospheric phenomenon. But those who had witnessed the truth recognized it as something more profound, evidence that even across the vast emptiness of space, love could create something entirely new from the fragments of what was broken.